Hello, everyone. My next guest on the interview series is a young polyglot from UK. His name is Alex Rawlings. Nice to have you.
Likewise, thank you for setting up this interview.
So thanks for joining us, Alex. So tell me, how did you get interested into this language business? How did it all started?
Well, languages have always been a very important part of my life. I grew up in a bilingual home. My father moved to Japan when I was 5, and my mother and I used to go and visit 3 times a year. So ever since I can remember, I've always been surrounded by different languages and always been surrounded by role models of people who learn to speak different languages very successfully, and I always wanted to be like them.
Okay, wow, that's great that you had such exposure, I guess, early on. I suppose that answers some of my questions as to why you choose to teach, uh, particularly what I would call more difficult language. I know that your mother is Greek, so obviously you had the occasion to be fluent and master the language, but how did it come to the next level, I guess, of teaching a language such as Russian, which to English speakers it might be more difficult than say Spanish or French or something
Yeah,
like that.
so I did a degree in Russian. I started from scratch and basically learned the language pretty fluently in about 2 years, and then spent the remaining 2 years of my degree studying and translating Russian literature. So it was basically my full-time job for 4 years.
Okay. So essentially you learned it in 2 years, which is pretty amazing.
So I did a degree in German and Russian. That was my degree subject.
Okay.
German I've been studying now for how old am I? 25. So 13 years.
Okay.
And Russian have been studying for 7 years. I started in my, sorry, 6 years. I've started in my first year at university with a brand new ab initio course, we call it in the UK. And so we did intensive Russian for about 15 hours a week for the first year. And then the second year I went to live in Russia, where I was completely immersed and did a university level course in Russian literature and translation. And then the final 2 years of my degree, I was basically focusing completely on Russian literature and translation. So essentially, the way that I learned Russian was by making it my full-time job for 4 years.
Gotcha. At what point in your life did you decide, like you have a website, Rawlings, you have a constant video on your YouTube channel, so obviously it became more than just a passion for you of learning languages. It also became something you wanted to teach others. I suppose you became a polyglot or a famous polyglot, if I should say, at that point in time. At what particular time did you decide to take that step, I suppose?
Yeah, good question. So between the first and second years of university, so when I was about 19, 20, I was trying to plan my year abroad, which was going to come up, and I was on a website called, I think it's called Third Year Abroad, which has loads of tips about, how to get visas, how to find accommodation, how to basically live as a student in different countries. And while I was on that website, I saw an advert for a competition called Britain's Most Multilingual Student. And the advert literally said, are you Britain's most multilingual student? Because if you are, you could win an iPad, which I thought was a pretty good deal. So I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. So I filled in the form. Didn't hear anything for 6 months. And then out of the blue, one day on like the 2nd of January, I got a email saying, hey, you're through to the final round of, Britain's Most Multilingual Student competition,
I
and we'd
see.
love to interview you with our native speaker judges. So I basically did that competition. I spoke on the phone for like 2 hours to 11 different people. And then they said that I'd won and I got the iPad. And then there was this BBC video and a lot of media coverage. It's all about just over 5 years ago now. And that was kind of really a big change for me because it showed me that there were people out there who were very interested in the idea of people learning to speak multiple languages and people who were interested in what I had to say about learning languages, which is a very kind of bizarre concept to me. And I started blogging. I started to develop a social media presence, and I'm now in touch with lots of wonderful people all over the world who share their stories with me, and I share my stories with them. And it's just very, very nice to, as you say, be a professional polyglot or whatever you called it. But it's just very, very nice to be in touch with so many people who care so much about languages in the same way that I do.
Right, and that's on that occasion, I suppose, that you met Richard Simcott and the other polyglots and became a regular at the Polyglot Conference at that point in time.
Yeah, I met Richard at a European Union conference in Italy in November of that year. And it was Richard. I also met Luca there at the same time. And we all just got on very, very well, and we stayed in touch. And then Richard told me that he was organizing this Polyglot Conference in Budapest for the first ever time and
Right.
asked me if I'd like to come and speak. And I quite fancied a weekend in Budapest, so I said yes. And the rest is history.
Wonderful. So, without spilling the beans, since you're coming to Montreal in August, what should people, participants be expecting in a presentation by you?
Right, so I'm going to be answering a very important and, in my opinion, very interesting question in Montreal, which is there an ideal way to learn languages? And I'm going to talk about this for a number of reasons. The first thing is that people ask me this question all of the time.
Right.
People are always saying, what are the tips? What are the secrets? What is it about learning languages that we think you're doing, but we are not doing, that means that you're learning languages, but we're not? I'm just going to kind of deal with that question about, is there a way to learn languages that is significantly better than every other out there? The reason why I've chosen to do that this year is because I've just started a very exciting new job at a company called Memrise, which you may have heard of. It's
Right.
Google Play's App of the Year for 2017, which is very, very exciting. Actually, I think it's Best App, not App of the Year. Yeah, Best App on the Google Play Store 2017. And basically, my job here is to work as part of this language learning research team, which is very exciting. And we are basically trying to find out whether there is a best way to learn languages, and if there is, how we can turn that into an app. So I'm going to be giving a couple of insights as well into the work that we're doing here behind the scenes in Memrise in creating what will hopefully be the best app in the world in the next year or two.
Then let me ask you the same question. Obviously, you'll answer it in more detail in Montreal, but what is the best way to learn a language? Other than the technicality that you deal with in the app, is it from a personal point? Is it motivation? Is it constant studying? What would you say is the main element that people need to have?
Yeah. So you're very right that there's a lot of different things at play here, and there's a lot of different levels to this answer, which is
Right.
why it's enough to come to Montreal and give a full presentation on it. But I
Well,
think just as a basis,
thanks for the publicity.
but just as a basis, I think the one thing which I see time and time again is either present in those who do extremely well learning a language or missing in those who fail to learn a language. The one thing that will make you learn languages better than any other person is, inspiration, need, kind of motivation, as some people may call it. But basically, whatever you want to call it with these fancy Latin originated words, the real thing that you need is a reason. You need a why. You need something that's going to get you out of bed every morning and make you think, you know what, today, rather than just, sitting in front of the TV eating crisps, I'm going to sit and learn a language, because that's not a normal thing to want to do. Most people don't want to spend their free time studying. They want to spend their free time doing things that are, very mindless and fun. So for you to have to spend that time in your life learning a new language, there has to be a very strong reason why. And each of the languages that I've learned, there's been a reason behind it. There's been a story. It's not just a random collection of languages that I've learned because, it made sense, because they're all part of some chronological order of languages you have to learn in order to become a polyglot. Absolutely not. Every single one, there are friends there are relatives, there are trips I've done, there are books I've read, there are films I've seen, experiences I've had. The story of the languages that I speak really is the story of my life. And every single time, if I hadn't really wanted to, and even more strongly needed to learn those languages at specific moments, I definitely wouldn't have done it. And the reason why I know I wouldn't have done it is because there's a hell of a lot more languages that I've never learned that I would like to, that I just didn't have a reason to do it. So as a result, I never got past Unit 1. Rich, I think this is one of the wonderful things about the polyglot community is that we have so many different experiences, so many different voices, and so many different opinions on this stuff. And between us, we all kind of find a wonderful common ground, which is why I love coming to events like the one in Montreal in August and the Polyglot Conference happening in October. I just love getting people who love languages in a room and seeing what do we have in common and what do we disagree on. I think I've certainly heard many times that languages learning gets easier as you learn more, as you become more experienced, etc., etc., etc. And I think that's true to an extent. I'm on language 15 at the moment, and I've got to say it's very, very hard for me to learn number 16. It's very hard to just add one in that kind of mathematical sense right now. I've tried so many times, so many different languages over the last year. None of them stick. I just don't feel a drive to learn any of them, you know? So,
why do you think that is?
I have no idea. I have a feeling it's to do with circumstances of my life at the moment. I'm very, very busy, as you know, trying to pin down this interview. And as a result, it's just kind of clearing this mental space. It's mental space in my head and also this time in my schedule to push through the first 3 months of learning a new language to the point where I'm feeling quite, comfortable with it. I just can't seem to find that. But what I am able to do is go back to the languages that I studied years ago that could do with a top-up, like, for example, French, which I'm desperately trying to improve before I arrive in Quebec. And I'm able to find the motivation to do that kind of language study. But currently, adding language number 16 is not going to happen anytime soon. I think that's the other really important message about language learning, as well as motivation, is patience. And one of the things that I've learned recently. I recently met a very inspiring person who, and he must be kind of early 60s now. And I said, what's the secret? What's the secret to having such a fulfilling life? And he said, look, life is long. You have an awful lot of time on the planet to do things. And often it feels like it's short. It feels like it's running out. But in reality, you have so much time to do so many things, and you should never feel pressured by time, essentially. So I think that's really important for language learning as well. Nothing's going to happen overnight. As I said, I've been learning German for like 12, 13 years or something, and I'm still learning new words every time I go to Germany, every time I speak to a German person. There's always something new that's coming up, and I think that's the real joy of learning languages. It's learning to enjoy the process and enjoy the fact that no matter how much you learn, there's always going to be more to do. It's a hobby that never runs out.
So what's in the future for you? Other than participating in those Polyglot Conference, I suppose you have a bit more to tell us on?
Yeah, so the big news that's happening is that on the 8th of June, my book is coming out in the UK and also in Canada, but not in the United States. Anyone in the United States who wants it will have to drive to Canada first. So that's very exciting, How to Speak Any Language Fluently, out on the 8th of June. And then after that, I'm kind of 2 months into this job here at Memrise. There's a lot of very exciting stuff happening, a lot of very exciting opportunities coming up, and we'll see how that goes. Which is, of course, the Polyglot Conference in Reykjavik in October, which I believe Tetsu, your organizer, is speaking at. That's also going to be a very exciting event that I hope many people will come to.
Wonderful. Well, Alex, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today, and I look forward to meeting you at LangFest in Montreal in August.
Thank you, Leo. It's been fantastic.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching this video. Remember that you can register for the Montreal Language Festival on the website down below, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a nice day.